Hey guys, and welcome to Madden Mondays. I'm your host, Joshua Kasperick, aka Darth Cripple on Twitter. And this week, we are going to be discussing suffering franchises. These are the franchises that don't routinely make the playoffs, haven't made a Super Bowl, what have you. And I want to go about discussing the ways that these teams turn it around so that they can fix themselves. Teams like Detroit, Cleveland, Miami, Tampa Bay to a certain extent, even the Cowboys. I just want to go through and look at everything that's gone right and wrong for these teams over the years and really discuss the mechanics of how a team runs a successful organization. And get a few jabs in at the 49ers while I'm at it. And as you can see, of course, I played them in this week's video. And by the way, for those of you that are new to the series, as I always point out, this is a custom Seahawks roster I'm playing with. The Seahawks All-Stars, which means this spans the 40-year history of the franchise, putting the best players at every position that there is. So, if you're interested in that, you can track it down by looking up the information in the description on YouTube where this is posted. And if you're seeing this on Field Goals, the information should be posted in the article below. So, let's get started, shall we? Suffering franchises. We hear about it. We know about it. It's almost a running joke with teams like Cleveland and Detroit. It's kind of like the teams are reflections of a city that's not necessarily that great. And, you look at Cincinnati to some degree. They're also a little bit suffering, but they've been to the playoffs. So I just sort of felt like it was odd to include them here because while they haven't necessarily won playoff games and gotten to a Super Bowl, they've been remarkably competitive within their conference. And so, while you could consider them that, I wouldn't necessarily put them there. So let's get started on this topic. The big thing that I want to talk about to start this off in terms of discussing how teams turn themselves around, it starts with one relationship, and it is the most commonly toxic relationship to an organization. And I'm talking about general managers and owners being, well, for all intents and purposes, almost secret boyfriends. You look at any struggling organization, you look at an organization where either the owner has too much power to pull the trigger on things, aka guys like Daniel Snyder and Jerry Jones, and you just see common themes of, that GM doing the bidding of the owner. That if there is a GM, he doesn't really do much. In Jerry Jones' case, there is no real GM. It is Jerry Jones making all the decisions. But even to a certain extent, you often see that the dynamic is always, in the case of general managers, they will always try to save their job over making sure that the team is healthy. So, for example, if you notice with Tom Coughlin's departure here, that Jerry Reese essentially threw him under the bus afterwards, saying, yes, I picked the players and I put that on me, but there's also the element of the coaching. Which just tells me that Jerry Reese and Tom Coughlin didn't agree a lot in that meeting room. And probably Jerry Reese has the ear of the ownership there. So if you fans for Cleveland, if any of you are listening, Detroit, this is the relationship you want to target first. Before you talk about getting new coaches, before you talk about changing the organization, This relationship by far must be the one that changes. There must be no other question. Sorry for the brief cut in audio there. My heater came on and I don't want to necessarily have that in the background. I have enough trouble speaking up as it is. So, that is the one relationship that when you look at any organization, an owner and their general manager, and how close their relationship is almost correlated with any type of lack of success. You know, and there's like several different dynamics there. Sometimes you can have a head coach that is also general manager. As they go for it on fourth down here, and Kurt Warner gets in for the touchdown. Vultured that TD from Lynch. Anyway, you can see some organizations like the Patriots where Bill Belichick has a lot of roster say, but there's still a general manager there, and he handles the scouting and some of the draft aspects of it. But when it comes to free agency and the guys they bring in, Bill Belichick makes the bulk of the decisions of who to keep and who to let go. Well, I believe that from the looks of things, as Reggie Bush breaks outside on this kick return, come on, Eugene, get him! Oh, dang it. Anyway, one of the biggest aspects to that relationship was that Bill Belichick probably doesn't handle as much of the rookie scouting as you'd imagine, but when he makes free agent decisions, he's been one of the better general managers in the league when those decisions are made, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But so to kind of go in, how do you want to deal with that? You know, when you're building a franchise or you're attempting to rebuild a franchise and control things a little bit more, you know, what do you need to have happen? And so I'll give you a little bit of perspective, and of course for you Seahawks fans listening to this, I'll talk about Pete Carroll and John Schneider here. For those that don't know or were late to this party, meaning they arrived in 2012, as Richard Sherman makes the interception there. For those that don't know, and were Seahawks fans in 2012 and on as they sort of witnessed Russell Wilson and became interested in the team. And there's some fans that join because their favorite player goes there from college or whatever. You know, fans of Cam Chancellor start watching the Seahawks or, you know, whatever the case may be. For you guys, you don't really know what Seattle had to go through to get the current general manager and coach that they had. But before Pete Carroll, there was Mike Holmgren. And Mike Holmgren came in 1999. I've talked about this in my Pete Carroll retrospective. But this was where Seattle thought outside the box. There was a long history after Mike Holmgren came to Seattle in 99 for $8 million a year at the time, which was top coach money. No coach had ever been paid that kind of money before. Mike Holmgren comes into Seattle and he gets every hat. Like if they could have given him a hat for the peanut salesman, they probably would have, because he wanted to wear every hat in the organization. He was the contract negotiator. He was the manager of the scouting department. He did everything. And so in 2000, I believe it was the end of the 2002 season, where Paul Allen basically said, in fact, I believe it was at the front end of 2002, it may have been, but they essentially go, well, you can't have all these hats anymore. We're going to bring in a team president and general manager. And they brought in Bob Whitson. And here's, you know, I think that decision was for as much as, throw an interception to Eric Reed here. for as much as it was relieving Mike Holmgren of the general managership duties, it was also about repairing that line of communication for Paul Allen, because he's the owner. Everybody, that's the top of the pyramid. That's the guy you need to keep sated, because he's paying out all the money to run this team. But you need him to kind of stay out of team decisions. You need to keep him involved. But when it comes to the actual mechanics of running a sports team, you don't want your owner doing that, because he doesn't necessarily know what your team requires to function properly. So Paul Allen brings in Bob Whitsitt, I think, to repair some of the damage in terms of what he wanted to know. Mike Holmgren talks about Paul Allen as, I just missed Steve Largent on the sideline there. Mike Holmgren talked about Paul Allen calling him in the middle of the night, asking about certain stories he would read in the newspaper or see, on ESPN or something like that. And he said, it was hard to balance that sometimes. So I think when Paul Allen brought Bob Whitsitt in, it was just about trying to deal with that, bringing in a guy from Vulcan Sports at the time. But then they move on from him very quickly and go and get Bob Ferguson, another guy from Vulcan Sports with more basketball background. And he comes in and it's just a financial disaster. Okay? Just from a standpoint of re-signing guys, some guys got top dollar. They had to re-sign both Walter Jones, Matt Hasselbeck, and what else did they do that off season? Before they brought in Tim Ruskell. This was at the end of 2003, so Bob Whitsitt must have showed up in 2002. That's what it was. Bob Whitsitt showed up in 2002. Excuse me. I had notes, I'm just not looking at them necessarily. But anyway, so after all this drama and all this change of GMs, eventually Mike Holmgren stops paying attention to the front office. Deals are made for players, those players are never played, and this is the nature of how a relationship goes toxic. Because essentially you have two separate entities. You have the owner and GM and the front office, and then you have the coach, the team, and the front office. And when your team functions this way, it's very hard to get things done. Your players don't know who they answer to, so they are negotiating on two fronts. If they feel like the coach has no pull, then the guys they end up talking to are, as they throw another ridiculous interception to Navarro Bowman. But, so, that dynamic often is dysfunctional. Like in most teams, it's the GM and owner, and then the coach. It very rarely ends up being the GM, the coach, and then the owner. And I think Paul Allen, as Anquan Bolden breaks three. God, I'm doing so poorly. No. Let me see if I can get a hold of my words here. The frustrating thing for Mike Holmgren was the eventual, cutoff of his ability to make decisions, and then guys pulling the trigger on guys he didn't like, or just straight up trades. When the Tim Ruskell thing happened, I mean, there was debacles with contracts like Daryl Jackson not getting done, or Sean Alexander being signed to an insane deal, or just all these deals getting done where money was spent and then eventually the offense just fell by the wayside. And you could tell by 2008 that Holmgren was tired. And Paul Allen was tired of dealing with a dynamic where the general manager would make team decisions and then the coach would ignore it because the coach was mad or didn't like the players. And so when he went in to fix the Jim Mora situation, because Jim Mora followed Mike Holmgren, Tim Ruskell comes in, and had recommended Jim Mora. And in the end, Paul Allen was like, we have to start over. We have to blow this thing up. And so they bring in, they go out and they get Pete Carroll, and they have Pete Carroll hand select his general manager. Meaning you're not going to wear all the hats. So instead of having you wear all the hats, he decided to do something that's never been done. It's always been the general manager picks the coach that best suits, how he wants to run the organization. Because the GM is going to run the day-to-day operations and manage all the pieces that go into that. From managing the deals and the cap, to making sure the scouting department's doing the things you want, to making sure you're signing the right coaches, to all the things that go into running the organization, the GM sets the policy, not the coach. The coach is simply the complement to what the GM thinks he wants, to run the team. This is the equivalent of having the CEO make all the decisions, right? And essentially that's how you run a company. But it is not necessarily that useful when you run a pro sports team, and you need a different type of result. So Paul Allen essentially goes to Todd Leiweke and says, we need to get a new coach. They bring in the different dynamic by going out and getting John Schneider as a recommendation from Pete Carroll. Meaning Pete Carroll sat in on those interviews and said, this is my guy. This is the guy I want to go with. This is how I like the way he approached plans, as I just missed a Tulamili there. So that dynamic changed, and that's different. As I call an all-out blitz, and that goes bad. So that dynamic changed, and I don't think the league has realized that yet, as we haven't seen other teams kind of take the same idea. But in looking at suffering franchises, I think you have to start changing the dynamic of that relationship, as I said in the beginning. Whether it's choosing the Seattle route and basically having the head coach pick the guy that's going to go out and pick his players, or it's a situation where the GM and the coach have known each other before. Like, that could be a thing. Whatever it is, the best result is when the coach and GM are on the same page. And once you solve that problem, some of the other stuff should fall into place. The second thing that your team needs to handle instantly is the cap and free agency spending. Because your rookie spending, because of the wage scale, is always really going to be the same level every year. Okay? Even if you're drafting in the first round, higher in the first round, you're still going to have very controlled costs, okay? You're not going to have exploding cap or situations where that's a big negative. So you really need to bring in a GM that's going to handle your cap space well. And we've really seen GMs not be able to do that. And Seattle's kind of taken a different tactic that's slowly making its way around the league. One of the ways is Lynch breaks through a tackle here. Oh, man. Oh boy. Touchdown. Oh, man. But the big thing here is, in managing the cap, you've seen too many teams like the New York Jets chasing cap space. So you'll have them sign 2 or 3 guys in an offseason, 2 or 3 big name free agents, then they'll have to cut guys. And it's a constant rotating door. There's a couple of protected veterans that'll make the team, but overall they're consistently in salary cap hell, so they can't make big adjustments if they need to like philosophy or something like that. And here's where I think Seattle has done something remarkably interesting that the league should take note of. If you take note of the way Russell Wilson had signed his most recent deal, okay, he is not the highest paid quarterback. But when you look at what he was offered, basically a 4-year extension for $87 million, right? It's the same structure as most of those guys that were getting the big deals, the Cam Newtons, the Andrew Lucks will probably sign a $100 million deal, but all of them will be 6 years. And you might play through the length of that contract. But here's what Russell Wilson's deal did. Russell Wilson's deal made comparative money. Not the same money, but comparative money. And it did something that Seattle has kept doing since it started signing big name free agents. And that's, unless it's a player that they really only plan to have for 2 or 3 years, they don't sign the gimmick deal. And coming from a situation where you had Seattle's old GM signing frequent gimmick deals, meaning 7-year deals worth $49 million for Julian Peterson, or somebody, some contract like that. It was just a way to get them to be the highest paid guy in the league, and then they'd be gone in 2 years, and there would be a cap penalty, and you're consistently chasing cap space. And you're not really assembling a team that's going to be together for 4 or 5 or 6 years. You're just signing a team to try and win this year, and then you're moving on when that doesn't happen. One of the big thing that you'll notice about Seattle's current structure is that they offer a lot of guaranteed money. Between 50 and sometimes 60% of the contract is guaranteed. Though the years are lower, meaning you never see a 7-year deal signed, it means that the player is going to play at a high value contract for longer, between 3 and 4 years. So to give you a further example, for Seahawks fans specifically, look at me throw that interception ridiculously at the end of the half. So, Marcus Trufant, as we start the third quarter here, Marcus Trufant got a deal for 7 years and some big chunk of money, some big chunk of guarantees. And all I remember about that deal was the fact that his salary was like $2 million for 2 years, right? So for his first year, it was like $1 million. For his second year, it was $2 million. And all of his guarantees were paid up front in the first 2 years of the contract. Essentially, it winds up being a 2-year deal. So it's a 7-year deal, but it's really a 2-year deal. And when you go into the mechanics of it and all the things that happen, It's utterly ridiculous that, teams would do this. Sign deals that are unbelievably terrible for them, knowing that you're not going to keep that player for longer than a couple of years anyway, because financially you can't. You're essentially paying a guy for now to basically have to move on from him the next year, or you put yourself into a situation where you have to cut a significant number of players by the time he hits the third year of his contract. As a fundamental example of poor cap management, Russell Wilson's deal is the best example, is very salary flat. What I mean is, if you look at his contract, when he goes into the new years and new money of his deal, he will go from $6 million this past season, 2015, to $18 million next season. Now that might seem like a big leap, and it kinda is. But if you look at the rest of those years of that big contract, it's very salary flat. He goes from about 18 million or 16 million to about 18 million to about 21 million to about 24 million. So it's about between $2 and $3 million a year to have Russell Wilson's current contract. On the flip side, what you typically see is things like Joe Flacco's contract. When he got his new deal with all of his new money, his salary cap numbers were as follows: 12 million, 14 million, and then his third year, he had $28 million in salary and bonuses paid. So his cap penalty was $28 million. Okay? That's what you call poor cap management. So how does Seattle get away with giving a deal like this to Russell Wilson and no other team is doing it? First of all, it's the guarantees. It's the upfront money. A lot of teams can't afford the kind of money that Paul Allen can. Paul Allen can guarantee about 50% of a contract, when it used to be you saw probably about 30, 35, sometimes as high as like 30, maybe 40% of the contract guaranteed. A lot of teams just financially can't do that. Paul Allen's got billions of dollars, so shelling out $60 million on a single contract isn't a big deal for him. Right? So, Seattle said this: look, we'll give you fewer years, we'll give you more guarantees, and because it's fewer years, you have a chance for a third bigger deal. Okay? When they first signed Cam Chancellor, and of course we know Cam's situation where his contract isn't necessarily the greatest, at least in his view. When he signed his original contract, he was technically the second highest paid safety in the league at the time. Okay, he signed like a 5-year, $40 million deal. But the big thing about that was $28 million of it was guaranteed, well over half. When Deshaun Goldson signed his contract with Cleveland and became the highest paid safety in the league, was it Deshaun Goldson? No, it wasn't. It was Dante Whitner signed with Cleveland. I'm sorry. Deshaun Goldson signed with Tampa Bay, and they made him the highest paid safety in the league, but they paid him a 7-year deal worth $48 million, right? They paid him a 7-year deal worth $48 million, called him the highest paid player, and really, fundamentally, when you looked at it, it was a 2-year deal worth about $13 million. So over the course of time, as Gerald Jackson drops the ball there, thought I had him. So over the course of time, Deshaun Goldson was not going to make as much money as Cam Chancellor. And that's the difference. While Cam Chancellor was technically the second highest paid guy in the league, he had also been given fewer years and more guarantees. And so, if you want your suffering franchise to stop, you first of all have got to change that GM. You got to go get somebody that's a good cap manager. And the last thing you got to do is you've got to let your coach define your organization. Whether that was Bill Walsh in San Francisco, whether that ended up being, Bill Parcells wherever he went, basically. If you want to change that organization, you need a coach that can define it for you. And there's a couple of candidates I'm interested in. If you can track down a good GM, a guy I'm seeing on everybody's radar eventually is Mike Shula, the offensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers. I'm very interested to see this kid's future. I think he's amazing. And, so when I look at suffering franchises like Cleveland and like Detroit, I think there's possibility there. I think Seattle's shown a new way to do things. Again, it might not be as easy or as possible to do things the way Seattle does because you don't have Paul Allen's billions, essentially. But if you have a good GM that can put a good scouting department together, you have a coach that knows exactly what he wants and knows how to, sort of target a guy. And that's sort of the other interesting thing with the Pete Carroll and John Schneider dynamic. John Schneider was a guy that came in and utilized a lot of Pete Carroll's recruitment knowledge from college. So there'd be a couple of guys Pete Carroll would say, I'm going to target this guy. I want to target this guy like, say, Brandon Browner, or a guy he even talked to in college like Richard Sherman. Pete Carroll's got a real nice handle on some of these guys he backgrounded. And some of that's eventually going to dry up, but that was an element they used a lot of, and that John Schneider utilized almost perfectly to the success of the organization. And so that's another thing. If you're having trouble personnel-wise, a place like Miami where you're not even sure, you've just basically paid a quarterback you're not even sure will work, and then you've seen them bring in coaches to try and supplement that and try to mitigate some of the growing pains with Ryan Tannehill by bringing in Mike Sherman and some of the other elements. The big thing you may want to do is try to locate a coach that's got a lot of recruiting experience and success. I don't know if there's a guy out there that would have kind of the NFL background of Pete Carroll that went to the college ranks and had as much success as he did. There may be a guy out there as I go for it on fourth down here. And get Darrell Jackson right over the middle. Oh, I thought I'd thrown an interception there. Oh, my God. All right. So, the big thing I'm hoping for with these organizations is that they won't just figure it out. They're going to change the dynamic of the things that have held them back. Detroit, Cleveland, I don't know. Maybe you just blow that up. Maybe you just pull the nuclear option, right?
I don't know what corner you crawled out of, bub, but we don't find nuclear missiles all that liberating.
Well, Wolverine, I don't think you've seen Cleveland or Detroit. I mean, if you see the cities, I think the nuclear option is the way to go. I think you just gotta blow it up.
Don't you think we're getting a little carried away here?
Aw, come on, don't take it too hard, buddy. Anyway, I think I'm gonna end on this thought for suffering franchises. Guys, if you want change, it may just come down to that owner relinquishing control of the franchise. That's gotta be the truth. The owner has gotta see that he has to change. It's not just bringing in a coach. It's not just bringing in a mentality. It's about everything top down. You gotta have everybody on the same page. And nobody, just looking out for themselves. When a guy comes to you and says, "Hey, this 5'11" kid out of Wisconsin, he really tilts the field." He really tilts the field when we watch him play. And instead of the coach saying, "Well, that's great and all, but I don't think he can make it," rather he says, "Let's turn on the film and take a look." Because that's the dynamic you need. You don't need, the coach saying, "Let's turn the film on and take a look," and then have your owner wander in and go, "Why are we looking at a guy that's so small?" That kind of thing. Seattle had its own share of bad owners. Ken Behring, to be honest. Probably really just one bad owner, let's be honest. I think the Nordstroms did the best they could, considering. But, I hope one day, particularly, I'm a huge fan of Cleveland, by the way. I'm a huge, Browns fan where I hope they make a comeback because I love watching old games with, Marty Schottenheimer and Ernest Biner and Bernie Kosar and those guys. I mean, that's great stuff. Of course, I never enjoyed watching Detroit. As much as Barry Sanders was a freak, there wasn't anything exciting about that team. The Browns had a good team for a few years in the 80s. And you pull up any historical stuff on them, it's just, they were good in the 50s, and they had some good teams in the 60s, and it's really sad to watch their decline. And so, again, as I close this off, as NFL fans, we should want these franchises to turn around. And as I close this topic out, I will leave you with this little bit of a play, and then I will be commentating the last half of this game as I try to close out in a pretty strong comeback attempt. So I will see you after this break.
As he got behind the defender, he still had to stay in bounds. And to do so, he was really walking the old tightrope. Let's see if we can catch it. Now, this is what Zorn creates. He fakes that sprint draw, keeps the pass rush off him. As he throws the ball to Largent, let's take a look at the way he keeps himself in bounds. That's what you call a top-notch receiver.
Well, that's two for him today. Zorn Largent, Steve Largent, University of Tulsa.
Like they're fast, they're fresh, they're rested. It's been fun to watch.
It's a two-tight end formation.
Some elements like this, as we bring it back in, I watch a game like this, and, I'm going through it. I'm not very good at this game. I'm not. I found this game really oddly frustrating because of because I don't play much with Russell Wilson. I find that I struggle as Kenny easily breaks up a pass. I find that I struggle with controlling Russell Wilson. I've thrown a lot of interceptions. Just been really bad at getting a feel for it, and the engine itself, it's so different. I talked about it a little bit last week, I think, where handling Kurt Warner was really different. His agility was way off the charts, so he could make cuts I was not aware of. But I certainly missed certain plays because I couldn't get a feel for how he handled. I'm just playing this game can be really frustrating, and this game was frustrating in and of itself because of the fact that it's San Francisco and I've played just horribly, as you saw, calling some blitzes in places where I shouldn't, missed tackles, just overall just not had a very good game. So as Joey Galloway gets outside, that was a nice floated pass. That was one of my rare good ones. The cool thing about this week, last week I had intended to run Warner behind the 05 line, but I forgot to. So the right side was actually Brian Millard and Howard Ballard last week on the right side, with, of course, Walter Jones, Hutchinson, and Tobeck as your left tackle, guard, and center on the left side. So, but this week I got, as we get a flag for a face mask here on Kurt Warner, and move in. Let's see what can happen here. But yeah, I found that I was panicking a lot with Wilson, and I was scrambling out of the pocket. I don't know if it's his speed or whatever it is, but I couldn't get a feel for him, and I tended to move. Like, I don't know if guys with slower overall speed just don't slide in the pocket as well, because I always felt like I was abandoning the pocket unintentionally as we get stopped on second and 4 and go to 3rd and 4. Now we got to try to get in the end zone here. And there's a touchdown to Darrell Jackson. A nice little... I've run that play probably 6 times in a game, and I just always seem to get one or the other, either the little Z spot or the actual corner pattern there, flag route, actually. But I don't know if any of you guys have had that experience where you just can't... guys' handling seems off, but I just had no ability to control Russell Wilson in this game. And I was really, really frustrated with it. However, Marshawn Lynch beasted behind the 05 line, getting over 200 yards and having that big breakaway touchdown. So that was cool. And I think next week I'm going to run with some things. I'm going to have a totally Seahawks-centric topic. I want to talk about the early days of the Seahawks. In fact, I may want to focus entirely on next week's podcast being related to talking about Jim Zorn and sort of the football rise in Seattle in the 77, 78, and 79 seasons. Because football was really hot in the beginning of the Seahawks, and it's quite exciting to behold. So for fans that may not have been around then, did we hold them? We did. 3rd and inches. Okay, we allowed the first down the last time. Now we've got to try to stop them on 3rd and inches. And I'm going to try to knock down that run up the middle. And they do, with Rufus Porter getting the key stop there. Rufus Porter, of course, being the undrafted free agent special teams linebacker that actually became a sacking ace, as Joey Galloway makes the catch. And now, with just a minute to go, Seattle is driving for the winning score, potentially. Now, a big thing here. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yes. Oh. 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 That actually worked. Okay. I did not think that would actually happen. Now Sherman ends the game with an interception. Okay, you have to go back and look at that play. Darrell Jackson's 59-yard touchdown. If you look at that play, the safety's blitzing there. And I panicked initially, and then I saw that he was going to go over the left guard there. Zach Miller stepped in to pick up the extra blitzer. Oh my God, I panicked. I panicked so badly. I thought I was going to throw a bullet pass. I didn't. I threw the right pass. I got away with it, and now we've essentially ended the game. Oh my God. Oh my God, you have no idea how stressful that was. So anyway, next week, guys, I'm going to be talking about the 76 Seahawks as Seattle tries to run the clock out here. Talk a little bit about Jim Zorn and the rise of the early teams. Some of their key players, so you get to know guys like Sherman Smith, tight end Ron Howard, and fullback Dan Dornick. Some of these guys that, were Seattle icons in the early days, probably more so than even the basketball team when they won in 79. So I will go ahead and see you guys next week. I'll play a few things on the way out. And I hope to see you next week. And I hope you enjoy this game. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.
Two different philosophies on the offensive side from these teams here today, Jim. And it doesn't matter. All you want to do is just get it done.
They come to the line at the 24. Takes a knee. Is every win sweet, or are the close ones that much more satisfying than just blowing someone out for 60 minutes?
Well, the close ones are more satisfying because the tension is there longer. And the longer you're under tension, when it finally comes to fruition and you win, it just makes it that much more exciting, Jim.
For Phil Simms and all the crew, Jim Nance saying so long.